So, hello everybody. Welcome back. We're doing another episode of Meet the Authors. We've got Justin, Justin and Chuck. We're your hosts for today. For our featured spotlight, we've got Jen Safrey. I think Safrey is right. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah.
Okay. And then we've got Sheena Monnin. I think I said that correctly. Did I get it right?
Monnin, yes.
Monnin. Okay. So,
yeah.
sorry about that.
So you got it wrong, Chuck.
Yeah, I know. That's okay. That's okay. We'll get there. All right. So thanks for joining us, everyone out there, and let's get right into it. So Justin, last time we talked about bringing in kind of an icebreaker topic, like a book that we all would kind of read. I didn't let anybody know about that, so you and I are probably the only people that have anything to say about it. But I'm curious, where did you come up with this? So the book is The Knife of Never Letting Go. And I have it right here, Patrick Ness.
Yep.
Which, look at that, right? So tell me about it. How did this come into your life?
I'm an audiobook guy, so here's my copy. Right. Well, I kind of follow movie news pretty closely too. And there's this movie that's been delayed and said impossible to make and everything and it came out and it's called Chaos Walking. It's got Tom Holland and Daisy Ridley in it. And when I saw it, it said it was based on best-selling series, right? And it's the Chaos Walking trilogy. I think the movie only goes into the first book, but it's kind of young adult, but it's very action adventure-y kind of. Pushing the protagonist forward, and they have all these things to deal with. I don't know if any of the other authors have heard of this book or heard of Patrick Ness. I think he's pretty new to the author scene, but his trilogy, this Chaos Walking trilogy, is really great, and I recommend it. I don't know if you got through it, Chuck, through the first book yet, or
I got all the way through it, and it was one of those books where I was like, at nighttime I was reading it, and then some nights I couldn't read it because it got a little too creepy for me at points. But then I couldn't put it down. So
yeah, it's a page turner for sure.
Yeah, and that's unusual for me. I can usually put things down, even the really fast-paced stuff. So this was, and the fact that you say young adult is interesting to me because I've been curious about. I mean, there's definitely some graphic stuff in there, even though it's not like people's faces falling off and stuff like
right. That. But it's kind of along the lines of like the Divergent series or, some of the younger protagonist books that, and they deal with it like the Hunger Games, I think it kind of considered young adult, maybe not exactly young adult, but kind of in that genre. So yeah, it's I don't want to like spoil it and talk about it and say this is what happens in the book and everything. But the premise is basically these settlers land on this new planet, and there's this germ on this planet that allows men's thoughts to be like broadcast around their head, so everybody can see what all the men are thinking. And starts out as just this village.
We don't all already know.
Right. So yeah, and it does a kind of a good job of skirting through some of the stuff that some men might be thinking, I guess, but but anyway, it's an enjoyable read. There's 3 books in it. There's I recommend it. That's all I can say, really.
Yeah, me too.
I heard the movie wasn't very good. I haven't seen it yet, but I heard the movie kind of screwed it up. So
it's those types of, like, when you take concepts like being able to read thoughts and stuff and you put those into film, it's hit or miss for me.
Yeah.
I've not seen people do that super well, and I've seen some people do a really successful job, so it's interesting. All right. Sure. Well, let's get into meeting the authors. So we'll take a couple of minutes, and let's start with Sheena, and you can maybe tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're working on or what you want.
Sure.
Talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me, guys. I appreciate it. Happy to be here. So I am the author of a science fiction book called Leaving Safety, and really enjoyed researching the scientific aspects of this sci-fi book. What would it be like if there were, in fact, a secret colony on the moon? What would it look like if there were scientists who actually were trying to create genetically enhanced humans, and all of the sciencey stuff behind it, and then going into it and infusing it with reality in terms of human feelings, human thoughts, et cetera, et cetera. So that's my most current project, and really enjoyed it. It published last year in September. So it's just really, really excited about that.
I can't wait to read it, actually.
Oh my God, you haven't read it yet?
No, I haven't.
I'm just kidding.
Well,
I haven't either. I'm sorry. I ordered it, but I
okay.
haven't read it yet.
It was Justin's fault. He
Oh wow, yeah, totally, completely.
But I did read about it, and I think and the concept is really engaging. I think I wouldn't have thought about like the moon and making that work and that whole dynamic. It's just, I'm curious where you came up with that.
Yeah. So I don't know, it was about 4 or 5 years ago that I dreamed up the concept, but didn't really do a whole lot with it. I think a lot of writers might be like that, where we get inspiration, we get ideas, and then finding the discipline and the time to just sit down and actually write it is a totally different story. So I was watching a couple of documentaries on the moon and NASA, et cetera, just being a nerd. And that's when I got the idea. And I was like, one day we're going to be able to take a weekend trip up to the moon, like it's no big thing. And what would that be like if we actually were able to have people on the moon, like in secret? So I kind of took it and went that direction with it. I don't know where or why my brain went there, but it did. And then I was like, well, I want to actually incorporate Earth people as well, not just like science people up in the moon. So kind of tried to build the connection there. So, I mean, why go as far away as Mars? Why not just start right here on the moon?
Was one of the documentaries you watched Iron Sky?
Goodness, that was 5 years ago. I don't remember, but it could have been.
It's not a documentary. It's a movie about a secret Nazi moon base.
Oh my God. And what was it called again?
Iron Sky.
Iron
It's ridiculous.
Sky. I want to watch that now. Cool.
Go for it.
Yeah. Was it good?
No.
Oh, okay. So it's kind of like your thick book, The Boy with the Knife or whatever.
Right,
huh?
yeah.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
All right. Well, great. Thanks. Now I'm gonna have to go watch that. Actually, bad science fiction is one of my things. So, Jen, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and what you've got going on?
Yeah, sure. And I'm really, I can't tell you almost how happy I am to be here, because I didn't think that I would ever be in this position again. I started off in journalism when I graduated high school, and I worked at a big city daily for about 10 years. And then at the time I was writing on the side, and I sold my first book to Harlequin, and I took a buyout from the paper just because it happened to be. In fact, the books from Harlequin, my first book ever, stack of free books, arrived the day that I left the paper. So I felt like the timing was right. I sold 3 more books to Harlequin, and then I wrote a urban fantasy that Harlequin has nothing to do with Harlequin. So I did sell it to a smaller press, and it was a book about a boxer, a woman, a female amateur boxer, who finds out that she's actually one in a long line of tooth fairies. So I wrote that, and then as it happened, and I'll save you the long story, I ended up buying and owning and operating a yoga studio for about 10 years. And when I did that, I kind of had to retire from writing because, taking care of a business like that is a 24/7 job. And I really just had to choose between one and the other. And I think I told myself that yoga was very fulfilling to me, and it is. But I think I didn't realize how much I missed writing until I met my current boyfriend a few years ago. And he's a writer, and he's, I don't know what's up with him, because he's like almost, when he writes, he never complains about writer's block. He never says he doesn't have anything to write. He just sits at his computer and he writes from start to finish. And then he gets up at I can't even. So, but I watched him do this every day, and I thought, I really miss that. And so I sold the studio in 2019, and I didn't even know if I'd ever be able to write a book again. But I did write a romance, finished a manuscript about a couple, well, they're not a couple, 2 people who meet in an obstacle course race that they both have to win. But they fall in love along the way, which is very inconvenient for them. So I finished that. I'm shopping it around, and I just started writing a fantasy novel now, which I'm gonna kind of keep it to myself because I usually do when I'm writing, but it is a fairy tale retelling, so I'm very excited about it.
I like the boxer tooth theory, because that's like two birds with one stone. Just knock the teeth out and then go pick them up, right?
There is a tooth knocking out scene, actually. But yeah, my idea was that she's half human, half fairy, and that the tooth fairies can't fight. And when there's a threat to their tooth collection, really they need someone like her, who's a hybrid, to fight for them. So yeah, so that's what I did. I don't know where, actually I got this idea off a writing prompt in a writing group, and I just ran with it. So yeah.
Excellent.
I can't overstate the cleverness of that concept. I wouldn't have gotten there, and but
I had to think through a lot of stuff. Like, I'm like, why are they collecting teeth? And I decided it's because every tooth is a child's tooth and it has innocence in it, and they're trying to collect as much innocence as they can to bring back their old world the way it was before the humans came and messed it up. So I had to, it was a massive world building situation. But I did set it in Washington, D.C., which I think is the least magical city in the world. I mean, it's beautiful, but it's not very magical. So that's what I did.
Yeah, you used to live in DC. I can attest to that.
Yeah. I love it there, but yeah, it doesn't seem like a place where magic is really prevalent.
Yeah, dark magic.
Yes, perhaps.
A lot of the dark arts.
Yep. Oh yeah.
All right. Well, that segue into kind of, and we kind of covered a little bit like inspiration for the latest project. I think we let's switch it up. Jen, do you want to talk about like more? Do you have more to say about inspiration, or you can take some time to talk about pretty much whatever you want, really?
I kind of do have a lot to say about inspiration lately, because I was thinking about this question, and here's the thing. I realized that I started now that I've restarted my writing career after about 10 years. And 10 years away from writing is a really long time, but I'm also a different person, and I'm also an older person. And most romances that are out there have heroines that are really in their 20s and their early 30s. And I'm going to be 50 in a couple of months. And I met the love of my life when I was 47. And I don't really see myself as old. I don't see myself as, oh, look how charming old people are falling in love. Like, I don't think I'm at that point yet. So the book I wrote about the obstacle course racers, they were both older. The heroine was 45. And, because I run obstacle course races, I'm 49 years old. So, I feel like I wanted to start writing for Generation X, really, which is what I'm very firmly a part of. And so I think the inspiration and the fantasy book I'm writing now is really the way our lives change, and, the way we start to, women maybe especially, but I can only speak for women, where we really feel like we can be ourselves and we can go after what we really want to go after. And so those are the stories that really interest me now. And apparently there are a lot of readers who want it. There's a new group of, like a subgroup of Romance Writers of America, which is for, I think they're calling it seasoned romance, which hilariously is like anybody over like 35. So, but I mean, it really tells you how, us romance readers, we get older, and, I want to read about people like me. I don't really want to read about kids anymore. Right. So that's really been my biggest inspiration, especially because I'm somebody that shifted careers in midlife too. Like I'm all over this second half of your life stuff. So.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like you're doing something right, moving in the right direction. So
I hope so.
That's awesome. Sheena, what about you? What do you want to go further into your inspirations and kind of what makes you, I guess?
Now that's a deep question. What makes me me? But we'll stick more with my book, I guess. It's really interesting because growing up, I was more into, I guess, what could be called the soft sciences, psychology, sociology, etc. My master's degree is in psychology. So I gravitate towards more what the other author was saying, romance, fantasy, etc. And so it's really interesting and kind of a growth curve for me to settle into actually writing or attempting to write a really great sci-fi book, which is hopefully what I accomplished with Leaving Safety, because it exercises a different part of your brain. And so growing up and being into like psychology and what makes people tick and all of that stuff, it's definitely very, very different from researching what could be considered more of a hard science. And so it was a definite change for me to put my brain more into the analytical space. And I think it's very empowering. And I think that anytime you kind of take ownership of something new and you feel like you've done pretty well with it, at least the best that you can do, it feels great. So I think I'm kind of one and done with this series. I don't know that I'll be doing sci-fi in the future. It definitely requires so much research and critical thinking and documentary watching, but it was very rewarding to see everything kind of come together with it.
So that I have a question for you. You're talking about the hard science and the analytics and everything. I mean, how deep did you go into that? I don't know if you're familiar with the Expanse series.
No.
So there's basically a space opera, but one of the big draws of the Expanse series is that they're as true to life as they can be with like the physics, and the way they travel through space. And, I have a lot of like space stuff in the book that I'm writing, but I have one of my best friends is a physicist for the NSA. So every time I have a question, I'm like, hey, Andy, can this happen?
How convenient.
Right. And then he's like, that's stupid. And I'm like, okay, how would it happen?
That's so funny. Yeah.
But,
no, absolutely. That's a really great resource to have. And so for me, I did co-write this with my dad, and he has an engineering background and an MBA. And I really respect individuals who go that route, because it does develop your brain in such a different way than I chose to develop mine. So we really bounced ideas off of each other, and we dug really deep. And so when we were creating what the colony, the Scientific Society of Safety, would be like on the moon, we went into detail as far as how they move between the layers of the buildings and how the gravitational force is different when some of them make their way to Earth, and what that would physically feel like, and the food they have, and how do they make water, et cetera, et cetera. So we went pretty deep into it, and I enjoyed it. It was a really good intellectual process. And
excellent.
So we definitely hit hard on that, but then we also tried to make it realistic in terms of how humans think and feel.
Cool. So it's not like Star Trek where they're just like, oh, this planet looks good enough to walk out with no helmet on, right?
Yeah, let's just make it work. We'll survive.
I know it's sad of that upcoming conversation you're on, I guess.
Nobody's going to notice those details.
Right.
All right, but before we get there, there is a question. I added a question here just for my own edification. I think it'll help other listeners too. Sheena, let's start with you. What's your editing process like? Like when you get the book, your first rough draft, how do you get to the end? And do you give it to the development editor? Do you have a copy editor? What do you do?
Yes. So my process is a little bit different from, is it Jennifer's partner or boyfriend? I don't have the discipline to just sit there and write. So
yeah, me neither.
I tend to edit the bits that I've recently done to try to derive inspiration to move forward to the next bits or chapters, not even full chapters sometimes, not gonna lie. So like I'll do that. So I edit as I go, and I find that to work well for me. And then I'll just give it several run-throughs from start to finish. And each time I go through to edit it, I am looking for specific things. So you have to put your thinking hat on. Obviously, you're not reading for joy or pleasure. You're reading to find out what's wrong with what you just wrote. And so sometimes I'm looking for flaws in my plot. Sometimes I'm looking for inconsistencies in what characters are thinking and feeling. And sometimes I'm looking for basic grammar mistakes. So I do a lot of that heavy lifting myself, because when I send it out to a professional editor that I use, I want her to have to do just a little bit and be like, dang, you're a good writer. And I'll be like, yes, I am. Thank you. But really, it's just because I've gone through it so many times looking for very specific errors.
Yeah.
All right. Do you find, because what I find when I try to do that is I am so emotionally attached to the stuff that I just wrote that I cannot like get out of the story enough to see the flaws in it necessarily. Do you find that happens to you, or you just pivot?
I'm not very emotional. Like, I don't attach easily to anything. So no, I don't have that problem, but I can absolutely respect that because you do put so much into it. For me, it's more the fun challenge of just making it better and moving on to the next thing for me. So, but yeah, absolutely. I can totally respect that.
Okay. All right. Interesting.
Yeah. Chuck's just a bag of emotions all the time. He can't.
Well, I think I can relate to that. There's I go through my manuscripts. I'll write an outline, so I have a basic idea of where I'm going to go, how I'm going to end. That's the main thing. I write very complicated, multi-layered plots, and so if I'm not careful how to weave them together ahead of time, it can get really confusing fast. I can put myself in real corners. But once I get done with that first draft, which has a lot of holes, I might leave out technical details or leave out this, and I'll go through and I'll say, okay, now I'm going to go through for dialogue and make sure I'm getting all the characters so they have their own voice. And now I'm going to go through and get all the technical parts really lined up and then I'm going to go through. And so I have a similar process, and I wound up going through 20, 30 plus times, at least, before I'm finally at the end. And by the time I'm done with it, I'm going through and I'm reading through and I'm saying, this doesn't work. This just doesn't work for me anymore. I got to fix this back there. And I'm constantly looking for all those holes. And then I'll give it to beta readers who'll come in and say, yeah, I loved it, except that I'm not sure this part, and they're like, oh yeah, So I will fret and fret and fret in the hopes that if I give it to a final copy editor, they're blown away and honored to work on this project because they feel it's such a compelling story. But that takes work.
That's good to hear that, Guy, because I'm on like my third rewrite and I'm like, man, this is enough, I
want to hear what Jen has to say on this.
Yeah, for sure.
What do you think?
Well, editing is an interesting topic for me because I've been a copy editor and a proofreader as my full-time job for about 30 years. So when I write a draft, I actually was happy to hear Sheena say she edits as she goes along, because I do too. And I always felt like that was like a naughty thing to do. Like, you're supposed to just write your rough draft and that's it. But I can't stand it if I think I can fix something before I move ahead. So I do edit as I go along, but I do have the advantage, I think, of having, grammatically speaking, in terms of, grammar, sentence structure, other things, I tend to have a pretty clean first draft just because I am an editor and a proofreader by trade. That said, I have the same blind spots really as anybody has when they see their own writing. Like the book I just finished, I do have a critique partner, and she's been my critique partner since before my first book. And I gave her this book to read, and she gave it back to me, and she said, this is great, this is great, this is wonderful, this is wonderful. You use the word so many times, you have to stop. And I just didn't realize that that's what I did. And when I went through it and I just searched the word, it was embarrassing. But I really did, write a pretty quick first draft for that. And I edited as I went along, but that was still something I can't see. So usually in terms of before I send it off to an editor, I give it to my critique partner. She reads it all because she's read all my work, so she knows my voice. And I also will often give it to my mom, who is a career educator. She was an English teacher. So I have a lot of, actually, so is my stepfather. So yeah, I'm pretty lucky there. I've never used beta readers ever. It never even occurred to me to use them, except for the project I just finished, because I wrote about a couple in a weekend-long obstacle course race. And although I race like 5Ks. Like, I've never done anything like that before. So I went on Facebook and I went to this lovely group that I'm in for Spartan races, and it's a Spartan women's group. And I said, does anyone read romance and want to look at this for me? And I got half a dozen amazing women who all read it and had really good suggestions for me, you know, like, oh, they wouldn't wear a bib for this race. You would probably write the number in ink on their arm because the bib would rip, like just things I wouldn't even have thought of. So beta readers were very useful for me this time around. So really, oh,
Excuse
bless
me.
you.
Sorry.
So I think really I would just wrap this part of the, you know, this editing thing up by saying, if you know for a fact that you have an interesting relationship with the English language, I would definitely hire a proofreader at the very least to be the last pair of eyes on your book. So,
yeah, that's me. I definitely have an interesting relationship with the English language. Somebody once told me that I write English like I'm writing German, which was an interesting, because I put the way that I put my subjects in my.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so I have to. What's that?
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Chuck.
No, so that's just something. So I definitely, like, my wife is an English major, so I have her do my copy editing, and then I send it off to a development editor, but I'm still working out the process, right? So that's why I'm curious what other people are doing.
Yeah.
So I have a question for you, Jen, and you too, Guy. I guess you guys have both written a bunch of books. Which one would you recommend to get started with?
That's an interesting question because 4 of them were romances and 1 was an urban fantasy. So it really just depends what you wanna do. I wrote, in terms of the urban fantasy, Tooth and Nail. You know about it, the boxer Gone Tooth Fairy. So if that seems like something
Tooth and Nail, nice.
Weird enough to, yeah, thanks. If that feels weird enough for you, you can go for that. If you're gonna read one of my romances, I think I would recommend Ticket to Love, which is kind of my favorite one because it's set in my hometown, Valley Stream, New York, on Long Island. And it's about the heroine works at a pizza joint. So it was very home for me. So yeah, I'd start with that one.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, Sheena, what about you? You have your self-help books, and you have this one for the series. I don't know if there's a starting point in, like.
Well, it depends on how you want to help yourself, Chuck.
I guess.
I want to hear about the self-help, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, that one. Are you talking about Hands on the Wheel? That little book I put out like 2000, was it 15, something like that?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so that's when, that's when I'm 36 now. I was probably, 29, 30, whenever I put that thing out. And that's when you think you know a lot, and you're like, I'm going to put this self-help book out and help everybody. And then you go back and you read it, you're like, oh my God.
Embarrassing.
So I wouldn't necessarily suggest y'all start with that one. I would suggest you just avoid that one. But my sci-fi book is pretty good. But again, I think it's really cool, though, to take a look back at your own personal journey and see your own evolution as you're growing and maturing and really figuring out what life's all about. And so that book, since it's out there, is kind of just a standalone reflection of how I thought, people could interact with life and with other people and conflict and things like that. So
I hear a sequel in the works. I hear a How to Survive Your Own Self-Help book.
Oh my God, that's funny. Yeah, absolutely.
How to outlive my own help. Yeah.
But like, for those of you who've written quite a few books, do you ever look back at your earlier work and kind of giggle at yourself? Like, is there an evolution as well when you're writing fiction?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think, and part of it is when you're, as depending upon the purpose of what you're writing. I started writing as a single parent because I didn't have any place else to go. And I'm not a big TV watcher, and my brain's always working. So I would write short stories for my son. And I wasn't really even intending to publish them. But those kind of evolved over the years. And then when I started really getting serious and I started hiring, I hired my first developmental editor, and I said, I hired somebody really good. I paid them a lot of money, and I said, this is my master class. I want you to rip me up and show me how to sew myself back together again, because I want to be really good and not just do it because it makes me feel good. And so that was a real course, and that really changed my evolution of how to write. And so I look back at some of the earlier stuff, I see lots and lots and lots of holes. But even I'm going to publish, I actually sent my second book to the editor this week, but I wrote it first. And I published the second one first because it was a more contemporary story, and everyone said, we want you to get this one out first. But when I go back and I read the two, I really see subtle changes in how I structure things, how I set things up, how I brought characters into the story, how many characters I bring. I tend to bring a lot of characters in. I have lots of big worlds. And so, yeah, I think it all evolves in terms of how am I engaging? How am I really getting to the meat of it, as opposed to all of the fluffy stuff you think you need to do to build up to it, right? And that was a process of learning and, again, redoing. And then I took some Dan Brown master classes and some other things, and really started looking at my writing in a critical way. And then, of course, it's going to evolve.
Were those master classes worth it? I've been thinking about taking the Neil Gaiman master class.
I think it depends on what you're really needing as a writer to inspire you. They have what I do like is it's a one price, and you basically can take everybody,
right?
As many as you want. And that was really compelling to me. So I took Neil Gaiman, I took Dave Balducci, I took Patterson. I took Ron Howard because I figured he was such a great storyteller. Now, his was a lot around the production elements and stuff like that, so I didn't get as much out of that. But then I took Dan Brown, and he's very focused on how do you write a compelling thriller. How do you get the tension up? How do you get the audience to go along? How do you get over those humps? How do you leave how do you structure things? How do you build characters? How do you make people think that the villain is this person? But how do you create layers in your story and some of that? And so the particular notes that he gave me, I write action thrillers, and so it was perfect to the kinds of problems I was trying to solve and getting better on. So I think it will depend on which type of style and what you're really looking for. But they had such a great selection. The woman who created The Maiden's Tale is on there. So you'll get a really broad selection of Atwood, I think her name was.
Yeah, Margaret Atwood.
Yeah. You'll get a really good selection of writing styles and techniques. And I think that you'll find someone there that will really, I think, resonate. Now, some of them had a tendency to talk about their books and talk about themselves too much, their own personal processes, which wasn't as helpful to me as some others. So I think you need to kind of pick and choose what really rings true to you, but there's definitely a lot of good stuff there.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, and along with the masterclass thing, because I'm doing masterclass as well. I haven't done any of the author ones yet because I'm doing a lot with the filmmaking and the business side. But I would just also recommend, don't forgo the business side of things if you're going to do the master classes, because we're not just writers. We have to be business people if we're going to get our work out there. And I would say, yeah, look at it from that perspective as well.
Perfect segue to something I wanted to ask the group about.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. And so, yeah. So I just did Daniel Pink's on persuasion and stuff, but it's great for learning how to pitch and stuff. And even though authors may not have to be pitching their work all the time, it's really good to help to learn processes of being able to tell people about what you're doing and get them interested in your work and stuff. So look at those business classes as well. Those are really, really helpful.
Point.
That is a great point, Jolene.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. You finally said something. You've been so quiet, Jolene.
Well, I've been letting other people talk.
Speaking as somebody who owned a business that wasn't books, I owned a brick and mortar business for 10 years. I can tell you, I mean, luckily, self-publishing is such a bigger business now than it was when I was writing 10 years ago. I mean, I have to learn the business all over again. I can't just kind of slide in now. But I feel lucky because I had to learn how to pitch to people on Facebook and put ads out and sell something that people wanted. And, all of that is going to be very useful for me going forward. So I fully agree. The more business skills you have, the more you can learn how to copyright on your own website, the better, you know.
I get a pretty good business education because I work for the government. So I do the exact opposite of what they do. and it usually works out.
I am curious about that question that Guy had.
Oh yeah.
I was actually, I come from a business background, and someone on the advisory board of a small marketing company, and they know that I'm a writer, and a couple of them have read my first book and loved it. And they came to me recently and they said, Guy, would you like to do like a web streaming interview or evening with Guy Morris kind of event? I said, you could invite your fans, maybe, and the platform they want to use is called Hopin, and you could basically create this thing where you can have expos of maybe featuring other artists or featuring other services or something like that. And then you could set it up in sections where there's a free section and a paid section. And it was a complicated kind of concept. And he kind of gave it to me, and he kind of said, well, we started saying, well, are there other artists that would really want to maybe participate in this? Could we, is there a way to would consumers want to maybe pay for part of this, and as opposed to, and it got me thinking, and I was looking at the platform, and I started looking at it, and I started kind of really thinking about the promotional. I've done some research, and maybe I'm still learning, but I've done some promotional research, and I started looking at like Goodreads as an example. I did the author interview in there, which is really text, but it's not really, you have to kind of know where to look for and go look for it and go find it. And it's not really a compelling experience for a reader to really get to know you and to have an interactive experience. And so I started thinking about, I'm a business guy at heart in some senses. Is there a market for both from the author, and I think there definitely is from the author perspective, but from the reader perspective as well, which is important. But the concept is, would there be a market to create a series, like something, I don't know what the title, inside the author's mind, where you're bringing in a series of authors for video-based Zoom type of format, where you're bringing them in for an interactive interview, and where people can then listen. Then you can open it up for Q&A. You can have maybe a panel at the bottom where it might have author services for promotion or for editing or different things, or you might have a next, featuring, coming up author and some of their books featured or something, to basically create more than just a Zoom, but a Zoom sort of interactive conference kind of idea, right? So, and other companies are using this for training. They're using this for like virtual trade shows kind of concepts. And the license for the platform is kind of pricey, right? So I started kind of thinking about this this week, and I actually put a post out on Goodreads and a few other Facebook groups and said, does this sound interesting to you as a reader and or a writer? And the authors were all, yeah. And I got a few author and readers, so some readers are saying, yes, this sounds interesting too. And as I thought about it, it would mean sort of a longer term commitment, either on my part and or this marketing company's part, to kind of, the licensing itself is a big fee. But trying to decide, is there enough of a market there for authors to be able to want to have that platform? And the idea is, if I created this platform, could I go to Goodreads, the community, and say, we want to offer this as a feed into your community. And we want to also offer you have books of the month, and you have certain features that you're doing within the Goodreads community already. Can we take those authors and bring them into this paradigm, right? And then go to other places, like there's an online book club community. And I know that there are other reader communities beyond the Goodreads, right? So is there a way to take this as a online tool and plug it into some of these other online reading communities to enhance those communities, and to give authors a chance to be featured? And maybe there's a small fee, I don't know, I'm still thinking it through. But I wanted to just throw the concept out to you guys and hear your thoughts.
So I think it's a good way to bring like cross promotional synergy into kind of I just said that, sorry. But something like that, into the author thing. And I like the idea of, like, we have Jen and Jolene and Sheena and Guy, and you guys have fans, and how would you feel about maybe interacting with them like I was saying, in an online platform like this. I don't know how, some people aren't big on their fans because, because some fans can be kind of insane and crazy. So, that might be a thing to also consider.
Well, they talked about having a moderator for questions, and as I said, this is all early development, but they did talk about saying, you don't want to have fans asking you really embarrassing questions. So we'll have a moderator to basically say, here's another question from so-and-so. So they do want to be able to filter some of that. But yeah, that's a good point. So, but yeah, so I'm just trying to kind of explore the concept. I haven't committed yet. I've told them, yes, I'll do my interview, but whether this is something that can actually have legs for others, that was really sort of the concept, saying, is this really a need? And how would we monetize that need?
Right.
I would pay for, like, I don't think I would. So I did go to meet Neil Gaiman at an event in DC once, but that wasn't pay. I didn't have to pay to go for that. I do think that there's probably a need for like online collaboration that kind of replaces some of those convention types that we can't really do right now. So there's definitely a market. I think there's definitely a market for the concept of whoever does it right. I'm not sure if what you're describing is the right way to do it, but whoever does it right, there's an opportunity there. I would pay if like Kazuo Ishiguro was there, or if even J.K. Rowling. I would probably. So there are a few authors that I would pay to go to.
Sure.
But I think you would have to be mindful, like whoever was putting it together, of grouping of how they're grouping the authors together to make sure that the authors that you have a headliner, kind of like a band, like you have a headliner and then you've got the others that can kind of make headway, right? So I think
that's a good concept. So what let me just make sure I'm hearing what you're saying is that you would two things. One is that paying for an interview, and I kind of thought this, well, is not really something I would probably be willing to do unless I could actually have a Q&A with Dan Brown. I'd pay for a Q&A with Dan Brown, right? But most authors, just to hear them talk about themselves, I wouldn't pay for that. But I would listen to authors that I like, to hear them how they think in their process, and have an interview. And that's part of what I was asking the guys, is how would you monetize this? And part of it is, and I'm still, as I said, I'm still trying to think it out. If we could create an audience, if this could be built up into an audience, let's say we could build up an audience across 2 or 3 different platforms like Goodreads, Online Book Club, a couple others, that might have small value for the vendors, right? The vendors who are selling services, publication services, publishers, editors, designers, all of those companies that are now advertising on other sites might have some market. So I'm still not sure how to monetize this, but what I'm hearing is there might be, the other thing I heard you saying is that if you're going to have more than one author, have them grouped so that they make sense with each other. Don't have like a romance writer with a sci-fi writer with a political writer, because you're going to mix up your audience. Have like romance night, so have genre specific types of themes, maybe have more of somebody who's more of an accomplished person mixed in with a new person, right? So that you're kind of blending the content so that it makes sense for the audience. Is that right?
Yeah, that was my 2 cents.
Good.
Well, so that kind of brings up, I'm sorry, go ahead, Jen.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, he spoke about mixing the audience. And I think what concerns me about the idea that you're talking about, Guy, is that it might, I think from what I've seen, it seems like I think you would either want to build something that works for readers or something that works for authors, because I think they're really 2 different audiences. And then, not to sound mercenary, but at this point, I think you have to decide what your return on investment is, because if you want to create something that's a platform for authors, and so your audience is also authors, are you willing to really just do a nice thing for authors that might not have much investment return for you? Or do you want to create something for readers which then may translate into sales of books for everybody? You know what I mean? So
I'm absolutely trying to figure out what the right marketing model is so that I can not only pay the cost of the development fee, the platform, but basically be able to pay for the other services that I need to be able to do this and advertise it, promote it, et cetera. So I'm not interested in any other investments other than my book. But that's why I wanted to talk to you guys about it, to kind of get some of this thinking out, which is they came to me and they said, would you want to do this? They thought that it would be a great experience. But the more I thought, well, as an author, if you're offering this to me, of course, it sounds great.
Right.
But when they started talking more, is there a model here? That's when I started really trying to think. And part of it me says, yeah, I think there could be. But part of me says it's got to be structured and got to be done just the right way where you can monetize it. And that's where you're right. That's where it's going to be tricky.
Right. And I think you're thinking about it the right way, because the fact is, if you get more heavily involved in it, then that takes time away from your money-making efforts, which is writing books, and
Right.
so, yeah, do you want to stay peripherally involved in it to the point where, it can just kind of benefit you, which, is a good thing? Or do you want to get more fully involved with something and not be sure where it's going to go yet? So yeah, I think you're doing the right thing thinking through this, because it is going to take a lot of your time. And I think it's fine if you want to do something that's just a really good service for everybody, but just knowing that it's going to take a lot of your time. So are you willing to do that?
Well, that's and I'm really committed to the writing. I'm really pretty much at my desk writing pretty much all day long. So, to do something else, I'm trying to think it through in terms of what the benefits are and whether the other part of the team would want to do some of the work as opposed to me.
Yeah.
I can see a little bit of benefit in terms of getting to know the community, getting to know publishers. Basically, as a new debut writer, it gets my name out there. Will that have some sales value? Yeah, some minor, a little bit. But it also connects me into the whole promotional circle a little bit better than I am now. So I'm trying to look at those pros and cons.
Yeah,
so,
because
as
writers, we're used to being a little undervalued and underpaid, I think. and honestly, and so yeah, I mean, I think it's good if you're thinking about it in terms, because I'm always wary when someone asks me if I want to do something because it'll be good experience, because I want to be like, look, I'm 49 years old, like I don't need experience, like can you
no, I'm not looking for the good experience. I've had a lifetime of good experience. I'm trying to find out if I can help promote me, and if by promoting others, if I can help promote me. Yeah. And is this a service where I could at least if I did it, I could at least break even, make it worth the effort for that value. So that's why I'm trying to kind of get some thoughts and feedback. So I have another meeting with these guys in a couple of weeks where we'll talk more about this stuff. But in the meantime, I told them that I would try and get a sense of writers and readers and what their needs might be.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, I wish I had an answer for you as to what the market is, but you're doing the right thing by asking, I think. Okay. So.
Well, Guy, I hope you come back for April and we can tell us what decision you made.
Well, it'll take a few months. This is not the kind of thing you put together in a couple of weeks. Yeah. This is months worth of pre-planning to make even the first one work. So,
gotcha. Okay.
So the thing with the online platform might be that, eventually we're going to ditch all these online platforms and go back to being a normal human society. Maybe.
Yeah, but, I don't know. I think there'll always be an opportunity to augment some of those things with these kinds of experiences. For again, Goodreads is a great example. It's a good community, good place to go. A little bit flat in terms of its ability to interact with people, right? Sometimes the threads are a little dry. I don't even know how to get the new one started. I don't know how to really get in, to really talk about the things I want to talk about. So it's kind of one-sided. It's not really flexible in that way. Some of the other communities are kind of the same way. They're very text oriented. And so I think something like this that can bring people face to face with their authors has value for the reader, particularly the fan reader who's looking at somebody with a series or something. And certainly for the authors who are always looking for ways to promote their book and talk about what they're doing. And so I don't know a single author who doesn't love talking about their book.
So that's another thing that I wanted to kind of ask you guys. Last year, 2019, I think, I went to Comic-Con and there was an author panel and I got to speak to some of the authors. Have you guys ever done any kind? I know Jolene, you have, like at the library. That's where I met you originally. But have you guys ever done any convention work or anything like that promoting your books? Like a romance convention for Jen or Jolene, maybe you were at Comic-Con or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've definitely, I mean, not recently. This was before I had the studio because I'm just jumping back into this career now. But yeah, at the time, I mean, I did a number of book signings at bookstores. I sat on a couple of panels. I'm trying to remember exactly what they were. I sat on a panel at UMass Amherst for something once, and I can't remember what it was. But if I hear of a panel going on, I usually leap into it. You know, I'll call them and be like, I'll do it. Because, you know, it's good to get your face out there. And frankly, I have never considered myself a public speaker. So it also gives me a chance to open up and talk to people. And it's much easier to talk to you guys than say like just a room full of strangers and I don't know what I have in common with them. With you guys, I know, oh yeah, we're going to talk about books. So it's cool. But yeah, I mean, I find that they're valuable, and I find that people really do want to, readers really like to see the face behind a book that they're interested in. And it's weird, like they want to see that you're a real person. I mean, it's funny to us because we all write, and obviously we're all just messed up human beings. But I think, you know, they really want to see you and hear what you have to say. And it really does give you a nice connection. So I advise it if you have the opportunity. And if you don't have the opportunity, just call bookstores and make the opportunity, which is basically what I did. I was like, I wrote a book, can I come there? And they were like, I guess so. Like they just didn't even know what to say to me.
I just call them up and tell them I'll sign random books. Just grab one off the shelf and I'll sign it for you.
I have done that. I've gone to stores and I've said, this is my book, can I sign it? To some people's credit, they did make me show an ID. So if I had written under a pen name, I would have been in trouble. Right. But most of them were just like, yeah, here's a Sharpie. So
yeah, sure, whatever.
You can just do that anywhere with any book, really.
Yeah.
Barnes and Noble. Good. Oh, Barnes and Noble is a little different on that one. They, I mean, you can go in and do book signings, but your book has to be published through Barnes. Well, you can have them published through other publishers, not Amazon.
Oh, really?
Have your book published through Amazon to be in Barnes & Noble, but you can publish on Barnes & Noble. And once it's published on Barnes & Noble's platform, you can actually do book signings in their stores. But you can't, if you're not part of Barnes & Noble or one of the publishing groups that they associate with, you can't just go in and do a book signing there. Just kind of a heads up. But it's not too hard to even if you are on Amazon, to just add Barnes & Noble to your list and just open up another door for you. But yeah.
Jolene, have you done Comic-Con?
I have done Comic-Con. Yeah. Well, I have done various conventions where I've had booths. A lot of times the booths are actually more for my film company, but I do have my books there too. So it's kind of a win-win. I did do Emerald City, but not exactly the way that most people did it. I actually, I was just there as a person, like just a convention goer, but I dressed up and I had a Loraine, which is, if you go to the website and you see the author page, you see a picture of me with this dragon-like creature on my shoulders. Yeah. That was actually built for Emerald City, and it's a puppet, and it says it moves, its head moves, its mouth opens and stuff like that. Awesome. And the whole thing was, it's because I couldn't afford to get a booth there. But I wanted to just go. And so I would be walking around, people would be asking, you know, what is that? What is it from? And then I would be able to say, it's from my book series. And because I had a military style vest that the puppet is attached to, it had all these wonderful pockets, plenty of space for business cards. So I was handing them out. And so it was great. And I actually did see an increase in sales of books after that weekend, and you know, and getting a picture with my favorite actor, Jeremy Renner, with the Loraine was just an extra. That was the cherry on top. So, you know, what can I say?
Oh, nicely done.
How about you, Sheena? I know you're only into the one sci-fi so far, but have you done, what kind of promotion have you done?
Yeah, so for my day job, I run our marketing department for a startup company. So we get real creative on how can we get the biggest return for very little financial investment. So because of that, I have been able to make a surprising number of sales. And as a more of a newbie author, it was very nice and surprising. And one of the techniques that I'm using to sort of raise awareness for my book is The way that my father and I publish is through our own media company, Luminosity Media Company. And so what I've done is just started offering for free professional book reviews through my media group with a nice little 5-star emblem if your book is awesome, or 4-star or 3-star, and just offering that out there for free. And the way that authors can submit to have a professional review is through my website. So they have to take a look at my book at that point. And so I've had just under 100 submissions from January till now, authors wanting me to read and review their book for free. So I'm looking at ways to monetize that in the future and create my own awards program, things like that. But that's just one tool that I've used. Everyone loves receiving something quality for free, so it's hopeful to provide that. I've run some Amazon ads as well, and because of my marketing know-how, I was able to get very high conversion on those. So just been, very fortunate with that. But no, as far as like conferences and cool things that you guys are doing, I haven't done that yet because my book was published last year in the middle of COVID. Haven't been able to do that, but that sounds super awesome.
Yeah, I'm the same. I published in COVID, so I'm kind of been doing a lot of online. And I've gotten involved in a group that does a lot of Northwest trade shows and book shows. So I'll be hitting that route starting this summer, and I'm really looking forward to that.
Excellent.
But it is hard to get that notice. Sheena, if you do free reviews, I'd love to get your thoughts.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that we're on the same email thread, so just send me an email, and I'm happy to take a look and give you my honest thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you. So that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah, that's pretty innovative.
Yeah, for sure.
Nicely done. All right, we're about at time. So I feel like we kind of segued seamlessly into the group discussion section. And I feel like the conversation has been pretty quality. So I didn't want to interrupt, but before we go, I do have to ask the question about Star Trek versus Star Wars, and like which side of that battle are you on? And I'll go first. I'm firmly in the Star Trek camp. Star Wars is nice, but it was not quite as polished as it could have been. Star Trek is the future I want to see. All right, who wants to go next? Who's got an opinion?
I feel like I'm the only fiction author on the planet who is not fully on board with Star Wars. I am definitely in the Star Trek camp. And we probably in this household watch an episode of Deep Space Nine every night, I think. Maybe 2.
Oh yeah, I've seen all of them.
So yeah, we're Star Trek all the way over here.
I'm half and half.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm just I'm not a huge fan of either. I did go through a time when I was a big Star Wars nerd and everything, but that's cooled off with age and stuff. I appreciate them both equally for different reasons. So Star Trek is far more, intellectual, and it's thought-provoking, especially the original, series and stuff, and some of the different topics they get into, and it's just thought-provoking, and I like that. And so I really I have a lot of respect for Star Trek. Star Wars is more of when I just want to have a good adventure. And Star Wars is more fantasy. Technically is fantasy. It's not even really science fiction. But so it's just kind of, I just want an adventure. I want the excitement and the thrills. And so it's just kind of not have to think too deeply on any intellectual level or anything. That's when I go with Star Wars. So I like them both for different reasons. I think they're both imaginative. So I'm not a super fan of either. I love all sci-fi and fantasy and action. So that's me.
Nice walk. No, they definitely both made tons of money, so they're doing something right, regardless of how I feel about it.
I would have probably started off with Star Wars over Star Trek in the 70s. I think they did a better job at just making the world seem realistic on film. But they kind of lost me with Jar Jar Binks. And I think the new generation of Star Trek, particularly with the new actors, and I agree with you, Jolene, it's got a more intellectual, more philosophical sort of bent to it that I tend to feel I tend to align with more. And Star Wars to me feels like it's the same story over and over and over right at this point. So
For sure.
Will anybody come to the defense of Star Wars?
So, well, what does Sheena think? Well, maybe she's a Star Wars person.
So I was trying to just sit back in my little seat here. I'm not well versed in either. I did attempt to watch. I'm a millennial, so bear with me. It was very old. It was a Star Trek one, and I just couldn't get over the visuals. I just couldn't. I couldn't get into it. I was like, I'm so spoiled with Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and all of this over the top, amazingness. So then I did attempt one of the newer Star Wars, and I was so into it, but I only watched the one. So I'm kind of not really the best source here, but based on what I saw, the graphics, obviously, in the newer one, it had me hook, line, and sinker. So.
Empire Strikes Back is the best movie ever. That's how I feel about Star Wars. But now I feel like Star Wars has been way oversaturated in the market to the point where I can't turn around without being reminded that Star Wars exists. So it's like, I've had enough of Star Wars. Star Trek is kind of taking that same path now with all their streaming and all their shows. There's like 4 Star Trek shows at the moment. So I'm going to say The Expanse. That's my favorite sci-fi series set in space. So there.
I'm kind of with you, not with that one, but I was definitely a Battlestar Galactica girl.
There you go.
Oh, good.
But when I was in college, I remember I told my roommate that I fell asleep watching Star Wars. Now, I was a little kid when Star Wars came out, so, and she was so horrified and I think almost angry at me. And
what?
Yeah, and she made me go to her parents' house, which was a few towns away, and sit down and watch Star Wars. And to God, I fell asleep again. And I didn't even do it on purpose. I wasn't even playing. She was just like, you are not even a real human being.
Listen, I can't help it. I hear lightsabers and it puts me to sleep.
Right.
Boom, 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 boom.
I don't know what it is. I just couldn't. Maybe it was all the beeping and booping. I just couldn't. I couldn't deal with it.
Did it have you there at the end of A Clockwork Orange where they got his eyes propped open and just like?
I was afraid she was going to do that to me. I was like, please don't hurt me. Please keep being my friend. I'm really sorry.
All right. Well, so we've definitely burned another hour on a Saturday. So thanks to everybody for coming. This has been a great conversation.
Andrew, thank you for pulling these together.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks for coming, everybody. That's awesome.
Yep.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Yep.
Take
Have
care.
a happy Saturday. See you guys.
Take care, everyone. See you
See you
later.
next time.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks.